Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. And today we're going to be, taking another look at the brand new Rimuru. Kind of a disappointment. Does have value, but not as much as people want, including myself. Uh, a solid 6 out of 10 unit. But today, instead of just focusing on him, we're going to be doing another science test, which we haven't done in quite a while. Especially with, the Drago effect coming from Velzard and the element buff. So today we're going to be damage testing, comparing what buff works best, what buff gives you overall more value and bang for your buck, based on, cost of the skill, percentage of the skill, if there's a secondary effect on it. And so we're just going to kind of run Rimuru and a lot of the support units on, like, the Exalted Champions team. We're going to buff Milim one at a time and see how impactful each individual buff is. And then we can kind of get at least a solid argument on, this one is not as good as this one, blah, 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 blah. So this is going to be a whole lot of nuking clips. I might go, actually, go into Predator Battle instead of Beatdown, because it doesn't cost as much stamina. But either way, we'll get a baseline for Milim with just her buff, and then we'll start adding in extras along the way. Also taking into account EX boards and stuff, and making sure that we're aware that numbers will drop because of X reason. So let's go ahead and get started. Who likes science? I do. Okay, we are in Beatdown Battle. I originally did this in Predator, but then remember that every time takes stamina. Well, I can just quit out of this and not lose anything. So we're going to redo these two parts. So first off, we're just going to send the EX ult by itself. No additional buffs. We don't have Velzard active. There are no, other resistances down here that would actually matter. So let's just get a good baseline for Milim. And also, I don't want to use the Drago effect because I want this to be fair across all the buffs, which some of them do get affected by Drago, some of them don't. So for this test's purpose, I'm not going to use Velzard. She's here to give us that damage buff for being against a water character, and that's it. If I want to use the element buff, I'll bring Hinata or something like that. But we're going to try our best to just not use Velzard and not put the Drago on. So let's see how much her normal ult does first. And we get 96k. Okay. So we'll add that. I'll get the actual number. And now let's start adding extra buffs on. Alright, next up, Milim has two things going for her. 100% ult damage, 100% weakness strike. But I don't want to use both skills, I just want to use one. So we brought Jean, who gives a 100% ult buff. So we can just see what that by itself does to our damage, taking it from 96. You would think it's going to double it because it's an extra 100%, right? But, let's see what happens when we send it. Again, there's no additional effects, no Drago, no element. So just now, let's see how much the 100% ult damage adds to us. And now we hit 195. So, yeah, roughly double damage right there. Awesome. Alright, the second part of Milim's skill is 100% weakness strike, which we can get with Blanc, who also lowers synergy resistance, but we're not going to synergy here, hopefully. Or at least we're not giving us the synergy buff. So we can just see what the 100% weakness strike does to our damage versus the 100% ult buff. And it is 137. Okay, much less powerful than the ult buff. Good to know. Moving on. Alright, next up is Violet with her 100% magic attack buff. How will it hold up versus a ult buff and a weakness strike of the same percentage? Well, let's find out now, shall we? I'm thinking it's gonna be more than weakness and less than ult. That's what I'm thinking. 210. Never mind, I'm wrong. At least on the ult buff. 210k. It's a pretty good buff right there. Kind of why Violet's still really good. Alright. Since we're not going to use Velzard at all, because I don't want to bloat things out with Drago, we brought Hinata for the all-element buff. So 50%, and then she gives herself weakness strike, that doesn't matter. So 50% element buff across the board, so Milim will get her wind attack, and it's obviously not going to hold up to a 100% buff. Probably probably. But, I mean, we can still test it. 152. Oh, weakness strike sucks. Alright, good to know. Alright, next up is Guy's synergy power buff. I wanted to make sure that we didn't use his ult rush ability because that does put a stack of resistance, and I don't want to upset the values here. So we're just going to do the synergy and the 40% synergy power, and we'll see how that stacks up versus, you know, I hope it's better than weakness strike. Maybe it's as good as element buff. You know, I don't really know. Let's find out together. 218. Oh. That's better than a magic. Wow. Okay, sure. Alright, finally it is Rimuru's turn to put his 70% attack buff on. Synergy power very much surprised me. It is a newer buff, though, so I'm not totally familiar with its damage output still, especially since they don't really focus on synergy a lot right now. 7% attack should be, you know, above the element buff for sure. Right? Right? 182. Okay, then, you know, that's fairly good. 182 puts it just underneath the 100% alt buff. So that's not bad. It's not bad at all. Okay, let's test out a debuff now. The alt resistance down from Raphael. Now, normally you'd be like, Raphael, you can't bring him, he's got Pierce. It's like, yes, that's true, but if you don't put the Pierce on Milim, then it won't affect her. So we can apply the debuff now, boom, give these people Pierce, who they don't matter, and then we can bring Milim in for, not Raphael, for Veldora, and we can still benefit off of having the alt resistance down and not having her with the Pierce. So let's see how much this does to our damage. 155. Okay. So the thing about alt resistance down is it is more effective when you have alt damage up. So 155 doesn't look that good, but if you were to put the 100% alt buff on, it would look a lot better. One, because you'd have another buff, and two, because it would... how it's calculated, it works in tandem with the resistance down. So by their powers combined, it becomes a much better number. But, you know, hey, science. Alright, the final single buff that we're going to test is the EX alt buff from Shinsha. Now, I'm pretty sure it's just another alt buff that's added on top of. So I don't foresee this going super high. Like, I don't think it's going to be the 195 from the 100% alt buff. You know, you would think it'd be like 140 or 150 around there. But, you know, let's find out exactly where it's calced in. And if it does go higher than that, then ooh, great. And if it's, you know, roughly the same, then also great. 157. Okay, so I was pretty much on the money. Okay. So it's just a 50% alt buff, but you can stack it on top of a normal alt buff. So, all right, well, that's good to know. Let's now test out Space Rimuru's skill fusion, combining two things now. All right, this is our first combination buff. It's the attack up and alt resistance down. So, I mean, in theory, this should do more than these other ones. In theory. You know, let's find out. 190. Alright, not as much as some of them, but still, you know, fairly high compared to everything else. 190. Now, obviously, this stage does not allow us to pierce. It does not allow us to crit. So we are missing two other big-time buffs. We're going to go into Predator Battle and just test it. The stats will look different, but, you know, at least we can see where we get the same damage from. We'll probably do another EX nuke, and then we'll add the pierce and crit on. But this is going to do it for the main line, you know, buffs that we can use in a neutral stage. Element, alt resistance down. There are a number of other debuffs that we could do, and also, you know, various different combinations of things. But I think this is a good baseline for us to see what each one does on its own. Alright, since not a lot of people have Aqua, we're going to use Albus instead. She's, you know, a lot more available than a collab unit that's never coming back. We're in Predator Battle, which for one is not super weak point because it's less resistant to physical than it is magic, which is interesting. We do need to burn off a turn because the magic resistance is still on from Veldora. So now we'll EX alt with the Pierce buff, and we'll just kind of have to take it not as super exact science because we're in a different stage now with different stats. But I do kind of want to see where it stacks up, just for fun. 147, not super weak point, so maybe bump it a little higher. So I would put it around like 150, so maybe the same as the element buff. Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll do the hero crit or something. Alright, and the final part of the test, we'll add the hero crit, so guaranteed crit and 30% crit resistance down. Crit is by far the most impactful buff because it is a multiplier, not an additive kind of damage buff. So maybe 30% is a little bit low for, EX metas, because she's now 2 years old, the hero is. And, there's a whole such thing as crit damage, but that's not what we're concerned with here. So we do 165. Okay, so yeah, not super great, but again, we need to put that up maybe a little bit higher, so I'd put it around 180k or something like that, with no super weak point and everything. Okay, well, I think we've learned a lot here, so hold on. Okay, so looking at this, not taking into account these last two because they're not super accurate, but, the highest one we got was the 40% in synergy power, which is the least powerful buff, technically. It just goes to show what synergy actually does for you. And then next up is the 100% magic attack, and then the alt buff. So, each individual buff has its merits, it has its ups and downs. Obviously, all these the skill costs are wildly different, and also you can stack a lot of them on top of each other, which is how we go from 218,000 to 4.8 million, like I did in my Rimuru showcase, right? You can stack them, you can add them together, and they can do multiplicative things for your damage output. So hopefully you guys learned something in this video. I don't know what you will actually learn based on just single power buffs. Again, you've got to take into other accounts like the Drago effect. Again, stacking buffs on top of each other, being in a type resistant or type advantage stage with super weak point or just normal weak point. If you don't understand that, it's when the enemy is type disadvantage to you and also is not resistant to physical or magic. So in the beatdown battle, Soe is water and weak to magic. So he's weak to wind characters who are magic, which Milim is. But the Sky Dragon that we were in for Predator battle is weak to wind, but not weak to magic. So that's why one was super weak point and one was just normal weak point. Kind of more of a visual thing than anything else. But yeah, so here's some science class for you. Obviously, use what you have available to you on your own box to, combine buffs together. Maybe you don't have all these characters that do, like, the giant 100%, but you have, like, Summer Shizu who does 60. Well, you do some quick math and kind of average it out around there. But I think this is good to see. Most importantly, we learned that the 70% new Rimuru attack buff is kind of middle of the road, right? Better than the element buff. Not as good as synergy power, magic attack, or alt buff, but much better than weakness strike, which was the lowest one by far. Kind of not great, but I mean, Milim gives herself 100% weakness strike and alt buff for 15 points. So, I mean, you combine those together, you're looking pretty good already. But yep, that's a science test video. I have to go. I must leave for my team conference. But that's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later.